Meeting to order. It's 4:31. Can we start with the roll call, please?
Absolutely. President Abbas?
Present.
Vice President Martin is on her way. Alder Bennett?
Here.
Alder Harrington McKinney? Vice President Martin?
Here.
All right. Alder Heck?
Here.
Alder Lemmer?
Here.
Alder Wahalia? Alder Wahalia? Alder Carter? Alder Harrington McKinney?
Thank you.
Present.
Okay. And Alder Wahalia was here. Alder Wahalia? You have quorum.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stephen, can you please go to IT announcement?
Yep. All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the committee, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked the question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. President Abbas, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We'll start with the public comment. Karen, I believe nobody's registered.
Let me do one check here.
That's what I'm seeing on my end.
Okay, Karen, you're muted if you're speaking.
Sorry, I was having a little trouble with the connection. No registered speakers.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go to disclosure and recusal. That's an opportunity for a member of the CCEC to disclose or recuse. Anybody wish to disclose or recuse, please raise your hand. I do not see any hand raised. We will move forward to approval of the minutes. Sorry, I missed that. Can I have a motion on approval of the minute, please?
Move approval.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any comments, question on minutes? I don't see any hand raised. It's approved unanimously. Next, we will go on an update item.
Sorry to interrupt. I apologize. I didn't catch both them. It was Vice President Martin motioned, and who seconded?
Haley seconded.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Agenda item number 2, legislative file number 68893, update item Common Council Chief of Staff hiring process. So I will give you a quick update. So council leadership selected 3 members of the city leadership. One is Norm Davis, one is Director Sarah Edgerton, and one is Kathy Cran from City Engineering Deputy Division Manager. So these 3 city leaders are going to review the applicants, and after reviewing the applicants, they will provide recommendation of either 6 to 8 candidates to CCEC. We as a CCEC will take an interview. The questions about the interviews are still in process. We are developing those interview process and scoring criteria. The CCC members will be the one who will score, but other member of Common Council are welcome to sit and watch the interviews. The one thing I want to mention, the process is pretty much similar to the last time. CCC members, and more information we will share once we have a list of candidates moving forward, they have to be available for that day. And council office will be in touch with you with a doodle poll about the interview. So you have to be available for a whole day. You CCC member cannot do 2 interviews in the morning and skip 2 interviews in the afternoon and then another 2 interviews later, because we're going to ask same question to all the candidates and give them the scoring criteria. So it's very important for all of us to be there. If some member is not available, that's understandable. But we will do a couple of dates and doodle poll. At this moment, we are looking most probably in person, but looking at the variants, how much the COVID variance is spreading, probably those interviews might go virtual. So stay tuned with those updates as well. And one last thing is the reason we choose Kathy Quine and Norm Davis and Sarah Edison because of their intense experience with city leadership and also their experience working with our Common Council on racial equity. And I'm happy to answer any question if you have. Alder Heck.
Thank you, President Abbas. I just wondered if consideration was given to placing a member of current council staff on the hiring committee, given that they have so much knowledge about what goes on in that office and what might be required of a new chief of staff.
So Alder Heck, it's a really good question. I thought about it. There is a possibility one member of Common Council office apply for chief of staff position. So thinking about that, I decided not to add council staff in that process.
Okay. Well, I guess I can understand that could throw some complications into that. Mm-hmm. I would perhaps suggest that maybe at some point in the process that they be involved if it's not on that actual portion of the process. I don't know how that could work. Do you have any ideas about how they might be able to plug into to the process even after the selections have been made of the finalists? Or
sure, I could touch base with the HR and think about a few things. During the Matlin hiring process, we involved Common Council office, and they're in a question panel. They was part of the panel, and they also give her scores. I will think about it, how we could move forward while we know one member of the office might apply for the chief of staff position. So I will think about it. I appreciate you bring that in attention. I will talk to HR about that. See.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Alder McKinney.
Thank you. The panel that you selected, I have a great deal of confidence in that panel. To the question of having a staff person involved with that interview process, how was the current staff involved in developing the Q&A, developing the original application process? I thought that they were heavily involved in developing the duties and responsibilities of that office and working with the human resources in developing that. Is that correct?
So they are not involved in developing questions. As I mentioned, one of the member might apply for chief of staff position. So to protect that conflict of interest, they are not involved in developing questions or process. It's remained really transparent. And HR is involved, and these 3 city leaders is going to recommend those names to us. Regarding job description and duties. That's the President Work Group of Chief of Staff. They created job description. However, I understand your opinion. During Matlin onboarding training, the staff was very much involved. There might be a possibility, as Alder Heck mentioned, to involve staff in onboarding process as well. I will take your suggestion and Alder Heck back to HR, think a little more about it. I will also talk to Vice President Martin and accommodate. And I do acknowledge the staff have a lot of experience and council office could take benefit from that. So I appreciate that. Alder Vahele.
Thank you, President Abbas. I think I have the same comment along line with Alder Heck and Alder Harrington McKinney. And I think this is very important for the office of the council. And we have staff who would be reporting the person, they would be reporting to this individual. And I think some way it would be nice to either develop, maybe if it's a one-day interview, perhaps maybe the council staff can participate some of those interview process. Even though you alluded to there's a possibility like one of the staff might be applying, but that should not discourage other 2 staff or 3 staff to be part of the process, because this is someone that they need to work with and welcome to their office.
Your point is very well taken. Thank you very much. Any further questions or comment? So our timeline, just one last thing I forget to mention. So we're working on a timeline. Probably this interview is going to be conducted by end of February or middle of the February, depend on the availability of CCEC members. And then by end of March, hopefully, if everything worked out well, we will have Chief of Staff. So, yeah. With that, if there's no, Alder Vahele, you have a question?
So, hello, yeah. So are we anticipating one-day interview process that we block, or there will be a sequence of days with chunk of times?
It's a one day. We will sit down one day. It depends 6, 8, how much candidates we want to move forward. We will do interview. We will deliberate after interview. We'll see how much points we get, and we will make a final decision on that day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Then, if there's no further comments, we will move forward to agenda item number 3, legislative file number 6883, update item, transit network redesign process. Mike?
Hello. Thank you, Alder Abbas. I'm Mike Chekvala from the city's transportation department, which Metro Transit is part of. I do have Sean Hedgepeth with me, the planning and scheduling manager as well. Justin Sturenberg is out sick, so he is not able to join us. So I have a presentation that I'm going to try to share, and I'll go through this, if that's okay. If anybody's having trouble seeing my presentation, let me know. I can fix it. So transit network redesign, this is just an update on where we are and where we're going with the transit network redesign. The basic goal of the transit network redesign is to redesign the route system in a way that will better meet the needs of Madison area residents and businesses. So we have a website at the bottom here, mymetrobus.com/redesign. So one thing we wanted to talk about was kind of the relationship between transit network redesign and BRT. So there is an overlap, but they're 2 kind of separate but related projects. BRT has been going on for almost 10 years now, and that's specifically putting in bus rapid transit on the east-west corridor. And then the transit network redesign is redesigning the route structure of all the other routes. And so there is clearly some overlap because the two projects need to work together, and ultimately they'll form one cohesive transit network that will be one system that Metro operates. So transit network redesign is a little bit newer, but they're moving forward in a parallel way. So this was our transit network before COVID. So when we talk about the redesigning the transit network, this is essentially what we're talking about, redrawing this map, figuring out not only where the routes go, but also how often they run. And so that's what we're doing. Why are we doing it now? A couple major reasons. One is to address long-standing issues and discrepancies with the transit network as it existed before COVID, and to a large degree, that's issues that still exist. As COVID lifts and we move forward, we'd like to not simply reinstate the routes that were cut prior to COVID, but instead kind of grow back in a way that's more logical and helpful for people and reflects the future needs of the city. And then finally, we'd like to have a local route network that complements BRT, brings some of the benefits that BRT brings to the BRT corridor, brings some of those benefits to other neighborhoods in the city. So the frequency and the directness and the lower travel times and the overall better experience with the transit system. So there were some limitations with the existing transit system. Fundamentally, it did not serve a lot of the outlying neighborhoods well. The transfer points were a part of that, but it was also the indirection of the routes, the infrequent service. And so you can see in the inner part of the city, inwards of the transfer points, you see people that were served relatively well, that had access to some of the several routes as they overlapped and became a little bit more frequently, but out in the periphery, people were not served as well. So that's one of the major issues that we're trying to fix with the project. Transfer rates, we're not afraid of having people transfer, but we did notice that the people who are bearing the burden of the high transfer rates and the long trips were disproportionately borne by low-income people and people of color. So we'd like to improve that situation with the network. And so it's time to start looking at some maps. So the BRT system is essentially this 3-line system. The red line here is the east-west BRT system. And then the green line here is the north-south BRT system. And then the blue line will be the Middleton BRT route. So it'll be 3 routes that overlap as they come through the middle of the city. These routes will generally operate frequently, and they'll be very fast and direct. And so the BRT system is fundamentally about designing and planning around the central east-west BRT line. And then the transit network redesign is fundamentally designing the rest of the system. So all these other areas that are shaded in green here, including where do some of the future BRT routes go, such as the north-south line. We're fairly sure that it'll be on Park Street, but does it end at the South Transfer Point at Badger Road, or does it continue farther south? On the north side, where does the north-south BRT line go? And then how does the Middleton BRT line service Middleton? So again, what we're really focusing on is the entire transit network outside of the BRT system with the transit network redesign. Some of this may be review for some of you, and I apologize if it is, but I feel it just needs to be said. When we think about what we do with our public transportation system and what we want to get out of our bus system, why are we doing this? There's kind of 2 competing major goals. If you think about this at the highest levels, there's the ridership goal, which basically says we want to get as many people riding the bus as possible. To achieve the ridership goal, we concentrate transit service onto fewer routes with more frequent service. And ultimately that service is more attractive. It's more frequent. It's more direct, has lower travel times, and it's more attractive to people to use. People may have other options, but they still choose using the bus because it's an attractive option. And then the other goal is the coverage goal. The coverage goal says we want to have bus service to as many people as possible, so that people have as many people as possible in the city have access to some level of bus service, even if the service is infrequent, even if the routes are circuitous and the travel times are high. The coverage goal says we want to get as many people as possible within walk access to a bus stop. So, fundamentally, these are competing goals with a fixed level of funding, which we have and which we will always have. We can't do both everywhere. We need to make some decisions as far as do we want to go more ridership, more coverage, or somewhere in between. Okay, so with that in mind, we have drawn a couple alternative maps to show people and to get ideas from, and as far as to start the design for the transit network redesign. I'll talk a little bit about the data that we used first for designing the transit network alternatives. First is the existing system. This is the network as it existed up until last August. So this is the COVID network. This is the baseline that we used for analysis. We also looked in the mirror. We understand that the system has been evolving for many years and many decades. And so we're looking at the service that existed before COVID. But from an analysis standpoint, we started with the existing network as it existed during the COVID reductions. So one thing I need to point out about these maps is that these routes are drawn by frequency. So the red lines here are very frequent, every 15 minutes or better. The blue lines that are the darker blue are routes that run every 30 minutes, generally in the middle of the weekday. So routes every 30 minutes are it's a decent level of service. Say when's the bus coming? If it's somewhere between 0 and 30 minutes from now, that's fairly reasonable. And then the light blue lines, which you can hardly see, are routes that generally run every hour. So the hourly service is a much lower level of service. If you think about waiting for up to an hour for a bus, that's not great. Most people will not choose to use that type of service. That's definitely more of a coverage goal type of route. So this is the existing route during COVID. This is transit use. This was before COVID. So we wanted to look at the transit ridership patterns as they existed before the pandemic, kind of threw everything into the blender. So, some patterns emerged here. As you can see, there's clearly a lot of ridership in the downtown area. The near west corridor stands out. The isthmus stands out. But then you do get some bigger dots. This is boardings by bus stop. So you see Madison College. You can see Easttown Mall, Senate La Follette, and Memorial High School, Westtown Mall, and a handful of other spots where we have higher ridership, Southside Corridor. I'll also point out that we have the 4 transfer points in a different color, this lighter color, because although the ridership there is very high, most of those people, not all of them, but most of them are simply transferring to get through. So they're not actually going to that location, but they're just transferring through. What really drives transit use, besides the service levels, are residential density and employment. So we look at where people are living, particularly where the land uses are denser. We look at areas that are lower income and have lower vehicle availability, and then on the trip end side of it, where they're actually going to, people go to work, school, shopping, and other places. Those things are hard to measure, but what we can measure is employment density. And so we use that to create this kind of map that shows where we have dense residential land uses, employment density, and a combination of the two. We also, of course, have we look at spots like low cost grocery stores, high schools, community colleges, and other points of interest like that generate ridership. We looked at this in with an equity lens. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the main limitations of the existing network was the low quality of service to the peripheral outlying neighborhoods where people had very long travel times. They'd tell us that it takes over an hour to take the bus anywhere, and that's in a lot of cases that's true. We can look at census data, which has, besides population density, race, income, and car availability, as well as other things. So with that, we drew some maps that showed the ridership extreme, the ridership goal extreme that would generate the most ridership, and then the coverage goal alternative that would provide the maximum amount of coverage. So this is the ridership map. So you can see in the existing map, there was a very small amount of red routes with service every 15 minutes or better. In the ridership map, there's many more routes with frequent service. So you can see the BRT map, the east-west BRT line is represented as this route A here, which is here. It does not serve the west transfer point, but it's direct and goes into town. The north-south BRT line is represented as route B here, which goes up, and then the Middleton BRT is route F. Besides those routes that run frequently, we also have 15-minute service on the D line on Monroe and out to the near west side. And we also have frequent service on the C line, which goes out to the east side. All of the other routes on this map run every 30 minutes. So these routes in the peripheral area that were hourly in the existing map are now every 30 minutes, but there are fewer of them. So fundamentally, we're consolidating into fewer routes that are more frequent. And that's the basic strategy of the ridership alternative. The coverage alternative looks a lot more like today's system with the BRT lines put on top of it. So we still have the east-west BRT line represented as Route A. It does do this out and back to the west transfer point to serve it. Route B is still the north-south BRT line, but it's not as long. It goes from the south transfer point to the north-south to the north transfer point. The transfer points remain in the coverage alternative, and we still have fewer. We basically have no frequent service besides the BRT lines, and the other routes are a similar mix of 30-minute and hourly routes. Measuring outcomes are the basic outcome. The basic thing we can measure is transit access. How many destinations or jobs? How many jobs is what we can measure. How many can you access in a reasonable amount of time? We can make that measurement with these different alternatives from one point, and then we can aggregate those points across the city to come up with some numbers. And so I'll show these maps here. So this is the coverage alternative, and this map needs a little bit of explaining. The green dots in this map represent an improvement in transit access over the existing COVID transit network. So if we were to implement the coverage alternative, we would see some improvements in the green areas, and then some lost transit access. In other words, fewer jobs that people could access with the pink or the red hexagons here. Of course, we know that people go travel for other reasons other than jobs, but again, jobs are what we can measure. So in the coverage alternative, one thing that stands out is that basically all of the benefits are in the BRT corridors. We have some improvements in the north, on the south side, with the improvement in service on Park Street to every 15 minutes. Outside of the BRT corridors, it's basically a trade. We have some areas that gain access and some that lose it. With the ridership network, we see a lot more benefits being brought to the city, particularly in the periphery of the city. So we see much darker green and much more green, particularly in the periphery here. So we took this information to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board last last fall or late last year. And so we brought them the question of, should we go in the ridership direction? Definitely, with only minor corrections. Should we go in the coverage direction? Definitely, with only minor corrections, or somewhere in between. Ridership mostly with some adjustments, or coverage mostly with some adjustments. And so that, this is very much a policy decision. This is not a staff-driven thing. Although we would like to see some improvements in whatever in access and in equity and whatever comes out of this. It's very much a policy decision as far as where we should be on this coverage to ridership spectrum. So what they told us to do is choose number 2, ridership mostly with some lower frequencies to reach more places. And their specific direction was, if anything, go more towards the ridership direction. There was some concern that there would be some slippage into the coverage direction, and so they really they wanted us to be in number 2, but if anything, more leaning towards number 1 than number 3. And that decision was back in October of last year. Okay, so what that means is that what we're doing now is we're taking this ridership alternative and we're massaging it and adjusting it based on further work, further analysis, in order to look at where some of that coverage would be lost in a pure ridership alternative, where that lost coverage really needs to be there, and making those adjustments to this map, so that we can produce a draft map that we can show the public, show the policymakers, and ultimately refine. So these are some of the major focus areas that we're looking at. The far west side, we're looking at this kind of spot where we have a handful of routes splitting and crossing, and we think that there's some better ways to do that, to make sure that everybody gets the service that works the best for them, that makes connections. We're looking at the north side in a little bit more detail, and the southeast side. That's not to say that we're not looking at the entire network and making small refinements. We're doing that as well. But as far as large scale changes, these are, in my view of the work that we've been doing, these are some of the highlighted areas that we've spent a little more time on. We've also spent a fair amount of time working with Middleton and Fitchburg to make sure that the network ultimately works for them as well. Okay, so with that, I'd like to just go through some key takeaways. I'm just going to kind of read them because I think they're key to understand about this project. So bus routes will be designed to be longer, straighter, and more frequent. I think that's one of the fundamental outcomes that will come out of this project that people will notice, the lack of the transfer points and of the more logical routing structure. The majority of low-income residents in peripheral neighborhoods will experience less waiting, and barriers to accessing jobs and other destinations will be reduced. Again, we're trying to directly address that complaint that it takes too long to get anywhere. I have a bus in front of my house, but it's not useful because I have to transfer twice and it takes an hour and a half. So we will see less of that, and less waiting, less ridiculously long travel times, and so forth. The transfer points will be eliminated, eliminating unnecessary delays and indirection. So that's something people will definitely notice. Bus service will not be reduced in neighborhoods to support the BRT system. BRT service is a reorganization of service hours already in the corridors. Most routes will continue downtown and will not force transfers to BRT. BRT and local service will form a single cohesive network. So I think those are just some of the misconceptions that have been that we've heard out there as we've talked to people. A lot of people think that we're taking away the service in the neighborhoods and putting it all in the BRT system. And a lot of people have told us that we're going to force a lot of transfers to the BRT system. So I just wanted to put that out there and say that these two statements are what will be the outcome of the project. The redesigned network will be less oriented around the downtown 8 to 5 commute and will be more useful for retail jobs, hospitality jobs, and other jobs that follow less predictable schedules. So this is something that was a little bit invisible about our network prior to COVID, is that we had a lot of service that was really designed around bringing people downtown at 8 a.m. and bringing them back at 5 p.m. The commuter service. We'll still have an increase in service during the rush hour, but not nearly as much as we did before. Again, because a lot of those second shift jobs, the service jobs, and the other jobs that are not downtown, they have schedules that are not 8 to 5 downtown, and so that's a major goal of this project. The system overall will be simpler, more logical, and easier to use. What we've heard from the public. We've had surveys and we've done meetings, large and small, specific and general meetings with the public. Generally, we've, as well as online surveys, we found that generally they support the mostly ridership approach. There were some people that supported coverage, but I don't have the graph, but there were more people that supported the ridership approach with the more frequent service and the more direct routes. Some people would have contacted us asking us to reinstate the pre-COVID routes. There are a handful of routes, such as the 19, the 14, and others that people have been asking for. And so I'd like to address that quickly. We are collecting all comments and answering all questions as they come in. We will be analyzing requests based on their merit from a system perspective, from an equity lens. So what we'd like to do is really address the content of these requests, the request for the reinstatement of the service, and I want this route back, and so forth. Some of those requests are valid, and some of these neighborhoods will, in fact, with this system, see some longer walks to service that's more frequent. We would like to really evaluate how these routes look from an equity lens. Particularly, we understand that the people who have been interacting with us a lot are not. We don't get. It's difficult for us to get representation from a lot of the lower income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, and so we don't hear as much from them. And so we'd like to make sure that the service that we're putting out on the street is representative of the people in the city, rather than responding directly to requests. So in that sense, we're taking on we're reading the requests. And the complaints about those routes that were discontinued, and trying to understand the need for them and how they fit into the larger system. And that's fundamentally what this project is about, looking at the system from a high level view. Next steps, we will have the draft transit network design at the Transportation Policy and Planning Board at the end of this month, January 31st. So that will be the draft network that we will put out to the public. It will then be available for people to view and comment on. We will make adjustments to it based on further analysis and what we hear, what we gather from policymakers and the public. So we'll be having public information meetings, most likely virtual at this point, based on the latest news. We'll have online surveys again. We'd like to do focused geographic-based meetings, most likely virtual again. We're thinking about some in-person open houses. I think we're kind of rethinking that, but we'd like to focus on kind of sub areas of the city: north side, south side, east side, west side, downtown, and so forth, so that we can dive in a little bit and really kind of focus on sub areas of the city. The draft network will be modified based on this feedback and ultimately approved by the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. Our goal is to implement the new system in the summer of 2023. So it may seem like it's a ways off, but it takes a long time to do all these things. We'll need to redo all the schedules and so forth. So summer 2023 is when this should all be in place, and then the BRT system the routes will be in place in 23. The actual infrastructure will not be in place until a year later in 2024. So it'll be somewhat of a phased implementation in that sense. So that's the update of where we are and where we're going at this point. So I think I can take questions or comments if that's a good time.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your presentation. Let's start with questions. Alder Carter, please go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Great presentation. I just wanted to know, as I represent South Madison, will you be able to, two things, come to a virtual neighborhood meeting and present and get some feedback from the residents? And
yeah,
then,
absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll touch base with you one-on-one. And then the other thing is, have we looked at, and maybe you said this and I missed it, so I apologize if this is duplication, but do we know how they're going to be able to transfer off of the BRT to the regular bus system, or is it all going to be the same transfer card or ticket or whatever it is?
Okay, good. Yeah, good question. So the first, yes, we're looking for help actually in getting out into the community, and so any that we can, any help that you would be able to provide us to get us into neighborhood meetings and so forth. Mm-hmm. We're very appreciative of that. Again, we're going to try to host one general public meeting and then have some of those geographic meetings. But if you could help us with that, and we also appreciate getting invited to stuff and showing some of this information so people know about it. To answer your question about fares and transferring, from a fare perspective, the BRT system will be considered the same as all of the other routes, so we'll not have a fare system. It will not, be a premium fare. All the transfers will be the same, whether you're riding BRT or riding a local bus. We do have a separate project that is completely redoing our antiquated fare collection system, and so that's a whole another half an hour. I won't go into it, but it'll be it'll use much more modern technology with online accounts and fare capping and smart cards to avoid overpaying and avoid people who avoid excessive delays with fare payment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alder Carter. Alder Heck.
Thanks, Mike, also for the good presentation. Two questions. First is one that Alder Carter's question prompted. I hadn't really thought about this before, and perhaps you've discussed it, but I missed it. When someone does switch to us from BRT to a standard line, I'll call it, or vice versa, will they need to walk around the corner rather to a traditional bus stop rather than be able to take advantage of the platform, the BRT platform? And then a second question is about the approval process for the network redesign. You said that TPPB would be making the final decision, and I wondered if Transportation Commission or anybody else is involved in that. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's good questions. So one, yes. So rather than having one transfer point where we have half a dozen routes come in and pulse and go out, the local routes will mostly cross the BRT system, and so most people will have to walk around the corner or whatever. The transfer point system with the one platform transfer really works best when you have many buses there, and they just can't do it all on one street corner. So that's kind of the reason for the transfer point system. It's really driven by the service. If you don't have the routes coming together in one spot, then they just kind of don't make sense. But yeah, so people will in many cases have to kind of walk around the corner if you're getting off westbound and you're going southbound, you'll have to, go to the other corner of the street. The approval process is, so the Transportation Policy and Planning Board will be approving the plan. And the way I think about it is that's kind of a 95 or 99% of the way there of telling us exactly what we have to do. It tells us where the routes are going. It tells us, how frequently they run, and so forth. Any actual changes to the transit system routes and fares are approved by the Transportation Commission. The Transportation Commission approves actual schedules, much more detailed stuff, even buses closed and moved and things like that. So the Transportation Policy and Planning Board will approve the plan in early 2022. Transportation Commission will approve the final actual system routes, schedules, the detailed implementation. So my interpretation is that, there may be minor, there may be some interpretation of the plan between those two. Is 30-minute service, what does that mean at 11:30 at night as we're transitioning to, as we actual write the schedules. But the basic goal of the basic instruction of the plan will need to be approved by Transportation Commission. I wouldn't expect any major changes between the board approval and the commission approval.
Thank you. Just one quick follow on then, if that's okay. Because I'm not on Transportation Commission or TPPB, but follow it fairly closely, I think it would be good for us all to understand that those decision-making powers are derived from ordinance, right? For TC and TPPB, it's that's the way it always works when we're changing the bus system, right?
Typically, the Transportation Commission is in charge of in charge of route and schedule and fare changes. So usually those go straight to the commission. This is going to the board because it's a higher level policy and planning effort than we've ever done.
Yeah, I wasn't really questioning that. I was kind of making sure we all understood that that's typical and it's not atypical that these powers are utilized by both boards, right? Thanks. I think you answered my questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Alder Heck. I have a question for Attorney Hess. Attorney Hess? Yeah, so just to follow up to Alder Heck comments and listening from the mic. So it's mean TPB will make a final decision on the draft network redesign. What is the role of Common Council? If some alders have objection, want to bring this to a Common Council, so what is the process? Or what is the role of Common Council here?
I don't know if I can answer you sufficiently enough. I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the TPPB's authority. We can look at the ordinance. Maybe Mike knows better, more specifically, what its role has been traditionally. But boards and commissions, of course, have, when we have a board or a commission, typically they have independent authority. They're not only a committee that makes a recommendation for council approval. So I'm assuming, based on what Mike has said, that those decisions are authorized in their enabling ordinance for that board or that commission to make without having to go to council. And I can dig into the ordinance a little bit more quickly or closely if you'd like, but that would be my initial thought on it.
So I appreciate that. We can touch base that offline, look into the ordinance more in detail. Mike, my question to you is about the draft the final draft. So January 31st is you're going to present the draft network redesign to the board. And then what is the timeline to submit the final one?
So the final one, we have April penciled in. So that gives us a few months. That's not a super firm. I should say it's firm. We need to have the time between April 22 and June 23 to do everything we need to do to implement it. But there isn't, if that needs to move a week or two or something, that's not ironclad.
So just for clarity point of view, and as an auditor, my experience in the last 3-4 years with City of Madison, especially with the planning staff and plan commission, when any draft planning document come to plan commission, the plan commission provide direction and recommendation. They're like, yeah, that's great. That could go this and that way. After then it comes for the final approval. There are very minor changes. And if Alder Carter, your mic is open, can you unmute yourself, please?
There it is.
Thank you. So the reason I'm saying that, because after the draft document, a lot of people don't know what's happening until the construction start of the building. To be honest, as an older, I can tell you when the construction starts, I start getting emails. What is happening there? Why it's happening there? Same with network redesign. Some people might don't know. So how important it is between first draft document and the final, the community input process, would it be better for us to take now, between now and January 31st, to make a big impact and changes? Because I do have numbers of concerns about network redesign on the north side. But I'm curious, like how this, if you have any input, I will really appreciate it.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think we've been trying to do as much as we can to get the word out about this. I think people get confused because we do so many planning efforts and so many, long range things. We've been talking about BRT for 10 years. So I think it's extremely important to get the word out about this and have the discussion, more or less as soon as possible. I think when we have the draft network out, that's when we can show something that people will be able to react to. From my experience, that's when you start to get people to really kind of focus on things. When you have something that they can react to that they either like or they don't like. I think it more or less as soon as possible. I'd like to discuss with you how we can engage the north side. If we can do that offline at some point, but particularly between February 1st and April, the more we can do to get this out and have people know about it and hear about it before the ball starts rolling. Because when they start seeing the flyers in summer of 23, there's kind of not large scale changes that we can make at that point.
Thank you. And just follow up to your discussion, community input process and engagement on network redesign. Beside Alder, Mayadze organized one meeting on the north side. What type of outreach has been done by a city consultant hired by the city on the north side, focus group or the community of color?
So a good question. So we've had a multi-pronged approach to public engagement. We've done the traditional, almost everything other than the one on the north side has been virtual. We've done this is step 3 of the process. And so the first step was talking about choices and the coverage ridership trade-off. And then the second phase was designing the 2 maps. So during both of those phases, we had the citywide, more traditional public input sessions. And then we've also had an online survey. We found that online surveys are effective because they're relatively low effort for people who, they don't have time or they're not going to put something on their schedule to watch something. So we've relied quite a bit on the online surveys in order to get perspective and information. We've also been trying to engage in smaller groups, focus groups. groups that we've tried to put together, like talking to the UW and Madison College and so forth, and also trying to get ourselves invited into other smaller groups that we can be a part of. I think that we haven't necessarily done the full best job of what we can do as far as getting the word out. I think there are some people who have not found out about this yet, or they're getting little bits from different places and they don't know where to go. But those are our general strategies. So up until pretty soon, we have not focused on any particular area of the city. Everything has been looking at it from a system perspective. What can transit do for us? What does a ridership map look like? What does a coverage map look like? We have not focused on geographic parts of the city because we want to focus on those higher level questions that we need answers to. As we develop the draft map, I'm adamant that we do have smaller sub areas of the city so that people can look at it in a little bit more detail, because people on the west side, they know the west side routes. People on the east side, they know the east side routes and so forth. So we will be doing at least 5 north, south, east, west, and downtown in the phase 3 as the draft network comes out. But then we'd also, anything else that we can do, we're going to look at other types of focus groups or small groups or geographic areas that need a little bit more attention.
All right. I won't go in the comments. I will ask last question. I see a couple of hands already, so I will stop myself with this last question. I have many others, believe me, but I can ask those offline. So bus stops on Sherman Avenue. So I saw the network redesign is going Sherman Avenue. It's a really tight area. I'm really curious, like with the network redesign, would you also allocate where the bus stop's going to go?
That's a bit of a complicated question. So one of the questions on the north side has been, does the BRT line go on Sherman or on Packers? We have not formally decided yet. Basically, with the ridership and coverage maps, we kind of needed to pick one so that we could do some analysis. And we picked Sherman to show, but that decision is not made in any way. Packers is clearly the side that would be easier to put BRT infrastructure on. So we're looking into that. That's one of the focus areas that was on my map. That the southwest and southeast sides. But your larger question. Generally, this is not a facilities project, so the routes will serve the same bus stops that are out there. The numbers on the sign will be different. There will be some bus stops that will be closed, and there will be some new bus stops that will need to be added. And so that always gives us an opportunity to see if there's some way we can improve. We like to move the stops from the near side to the far side and so forth and stuff like that. There will also be some infrastructure components of this project, such as turns that we wouldn't be able to make. I think there are 1 or 2 traffic signals that we may need, a stop sign and a queue jump and things like that here and there. So there are a handful of things like that. But generally speaking, it will be different routes serving the same bus stops.
Yeah. All right. I will really encourage, we should have more discussion about bus stops. You might know very well, we struggle on the north side, Town Plaza. I don't want certain places where the owner doesn't want to have a stop. And with BRT, 3 doors and handicap accessibility, I think so it's really, really important for us to really see with network redesign how it's going to play with the bus stops on the north side. With that, Vice President Martin, question.
Yes, thank you, President Abbas. Actually, my questions are kind of branch off from what you just brought up, talking about accessibility. We know that paratransit is another system that is kind of entwined, but at the same time, it's a different system. And I am wondering about how concerns for paratransit and again, that a lot of the decisions that happen on that end are out of our purview. We don't have a ton of control over those, but like, how are we considering paratransit issues as well as other mobility issues in terms of people accessing stops between our regular transit routes and BRT and just generally. So this is just generally a question about accessibility and what we are working on.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like I said, generally, this is not a facilities project. This is a planning routes project. But we will use some of those opportunities to make some of those fixes. We do have some other efforts. For example, we're trying to make all the bus stops in the city accessible with the accessible boarding pads. As far as paratransit goes, that's a good question that we've been working on as well. So the paratransit boundary is generally 3/4 of a mile from the fixed route boundary. So if you're within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route service, then you have access to the paratransit service. So there will be some potential changes to the paratransit boundary. We will definitely be adding to it. That will be a benefit to a lot of people. It will also probably incur some costs to the city. So there will be some places where we will expand the paratransit boundary. There also could be, not necessarily, but there could be some places where we're retracting the paratransit boundary. Now, that one issue is that 3/4 mile boundary is just the federal minimum. There's no reason we technically have to use that boundary. So we could have a different policy. That policy has not really been thought about or investigated yet. I think that the first step is to find out what the changes to the paratransit boundary would be, given whatever comes out of the final network, and then we can react to that.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Attorney Hess.
Thank you. Just quickly, I took a quick look at the ordinances, and I have not spoken with Mike or Metro staff at all about this process, but in general, it looks like TPPB recommends policies to the council for the council to adopt, but then the Transportation Commission has authority to make a number of decisions consistent with the policies adopted by the council, and those decisions include service standards for transit, as well as bus routes and stops. And then also Transportation Commission decisions are final, but there is an appeal process. The mayor or alders could appeal to the council any decisions of the commission. So there are opportunities for the council certainly to be involved in those decisions.
Truly appreciate that. Thank you very much. Alder Carter. Alder Carter, we cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Looks like you're unmuted on our end. So is there a button or something that you have with your microphone?
Cannot hear you. Well, we will wait for Alder Carter. I can, if there's no further question from other alders, I can go in a quick comment. So Mike, I will work with you offline too, but my biggest comment is about racial equity. Oak Street area, Commercial Avenue, there is no BRT. Right now, there is a bus there. That is national occurring affordable housing. Majority of population is Black. And everybody have to now walk a couple of blocks either towards either Tip Top Tavern, or either they have to walk the new bus stop further down on East Washington. It's concerning. Some of them are disabled. You talk about grocery store in consideration. The cheapest grocery store on north side is Pick and Save. It is not the north side Willie Street Co-op on the north side. That's not the cheapest. The community across Brentwood Village, which is majority Black, they don't come to that store. It's $9 per pound chicken. Just putting that number, it's perhaps for many of them, it's not affordable. North side also Delaware Road, although Mayaz is not here. Completely the route is disappeared. There's more population is proposed on Ramish Farm and that area. There are a number of other things which I don't want to take the whole committee time, but I do think so it's extremely important for us to, when we talk about racial equity and especially Black, brown people, and do survey from them, I do think so this BRT route is disconnecting them, or at least not sufficiently providing them ridership. So perhaps offline we could work and see how could we address some of those concerns. That's my comment. And Alder Carter.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, good gravy. Mike, I just wanted a clarification of the Brt Transit and Badger Plus. Those two transportation buses, do they still come to the person's door to pick them up, or will they be using the bus stops that you're creating?
So paratransit, which we call Metro Plus sometimes, but usually we don't. Paratransit is door to door. So but you have to qualify for it. So the way it works is you have to pre-qualify based on your ability to use the fixed route system. And if you're qualified, then you arrange a ride at least 24 hours before, and then they will take you essentially door to door. And so that service is provided by private contractors. Badger Bus is one of them, I believe. They change from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mike, in the feedback, the last thing is the grocery store I was talking. There's no service in the new BRT route to the Pick and Save. So that's another concern you can add in the list. With that, if there's no further question, Mike, thank you very, very much for your presentation. I appreciate that. We will move forward to the new business. Agenda item number 4, legislative file number 68624, accepting the 2021 Agency Annual Surveillance Technology Report for calendar year 2020. I just want to mention that to the committee, we received an email from a former Alder, Campbell, and she mentioned about, she talked to me and Alder Carter, and the surveillance work has not been done yet. I think so it's important for us to get an update for Karen about the process and how lengthy it was to collect that information. Karen, could you please talk about on the process itself? Please go ahead.
In terms of the process of receiving the reports?
Yes.
Okay.
And why it takes so long for us to get there where we are?
Yes, it was for this first round of report requests, it did take quite a while. We have been working, I would have to go back in my email to see exactly when we started working, but we've been working since early summer, late spring to collect every agency's report. You have them there in that packet. Unfortunately, I think it will go faster. I mean, my hope is it will go more smoothly next time. We're going to have to start it up again in not very long, actually. So crossing fingers, we'll now that people are more familiar, we'll be able to make it go a little bit faster. But yes, the reason it is coming to you in so late is because unfortunately it was quite a, I don't know what to say, a lengthy process just to make sure we had something on file for everyone.
I appreciate that. We also have Sarah Edgerton here. So Sarah, feel free to, if you want to say something on the report, or otherwise, if any alder have question, comments, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Karen and the council office for doing this and collecting all of those reports. That is very appreciated by me, especially. I think that one of the things, and Karen touched on it, is that this is a new process. And so there was a lot of questions from agencies. I did see a lot of emails back and forth and emails to me on clarification on, do I have to do it? And understanding, in fact, what that APM and then the surveillance ordinance meant. And so now that we have this process in place, my hope is that it goes more smoothly. The other thing that we've talked about internally is we think we're going to move that data of the APM. And so we're going to talk to Karen and then the new chief of staff, looking at what that would be in terms of when agencies needed to turn in their reports so that Karen can get it in on time for that. I believe it's a June or July date. I can't even remember anymore. Yeah. And so that we can make sure that agencies are prepped for this and that they treat this as this is something that they do every year, and that this process should be started in January if they need to.
Thank you, Sarah, for all your help. I really appreciate it. I know it was a lengthy process, and also with Council Office, Karen, I truly appreciate it. I think it's important for CCEC to know how much work has been put for that and to collect that information. So truly appreciate that. I'm not sure Attorney has. I'm not sure. Do we need a motion here on this report to approve, or could you guide us the next step?
Let me take it, if I can take a quick look at the.
Sure.
Well, this is right. A motion to accept the report.
Okay. Well, thank you. Can I have a motion? Yes. Vice President Martin.
Move acceptance of the report on the 2021 Agency Annual Surveillance Technology Reports for calendar year 2020.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please? Alder Heck, that's second from you. Any discussion on the report? Right, I don't see any hand raised. I will consider this as unanimous approval. With that, we need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
It's moved by Alder Heck. Second by
She beat me.
Vice President Martin. Well, see you all at 6:30. Take care. Bye.